Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jason Marcus alongside DJ Bauer and Jeremy Ganes here for another edition of This Week in the NFL on Penn State Sports Night. It's week 12 in the NFL, meaning we only have just a little bit over a month left before the start of the playoffs. So today, we're going to be looking at what we think will be our projected playoff picture come January. To start things off, I'm going to turn it over to you, DJ, to give us your insight on who you believe will be our playoff teams coming out of the NFC.
I think that the first seed in the NFC is going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. They looked absolutely unstoppable. They just dominated the Bears, but they do have a couple challenges coming up. Next week they head to Seattle, and as we know, that is not an easy place to play. They also have the Rams on their schedule, and they have Dallas in Week 17, who will be having Ezekiel Elliott back at that point. So it's not a sure thing that they're going to get the 1 seed, but right now, Carson Wentz and that team has been looking pretty good. And number 2, I have the Minnesota Vikings. Case Keenum has been impossibly good. Nobody expected him to be this good. And the defense has completely stepped up too, so it's no surprise that they got 9-2. That big win over Detroit on Thanksgiving has them in good position to win the NFC North. And they also have some big games coming up against Atlanta and Carolina, but right now I have them at number 2. I think number 3 is going to be the Saints. They coming off a tough loss against Los Angeles, but they can rub that off and keep rolling along with games against Carolina and 2 against Atlanta. If they can get a couple of wins there, they're in good position to win the NFC South in a very tight contested division for sure. And then 4th, I have the LA Rams coming off a big win against New Orleans, as I just mentioned. Jared Goff and Todd Gurley are looking great, of course. And they have a test coming up. They have Philadelphia. That's going to be tough. They have Seattle, who they lost to earlier this season. Maybe they'll get a win there. And they also have an out-of-conference game against Tennessee. So things aren't going to be easy for the Rams down the stretch. We'll see how well they do. At 5, I have the Seattle Seahawks. They're out of the playoff picture right now, but they can just as easily turn that around. I know that they're a little bit banged up. Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman are out for the year, which is not good. But this team is playoff bound. If they're great down the stretch, especially in December, and if they can win a couple key games against Philadelphia, Jacksonville, the Rams, Dallas, then I think that they've got a good shot to get into the playoffs. And finally, my number 6 is the Atlanta Falcons. They're a little bit behind Carolina right now because of that loss earlier this year. But if they can turn it around with wins, they got Minnesota on the schedule, they have New Orleans, and they have a key Week 17 game against Carolina. If they can get some wins down the stretch here, I think that Atlanta will sneak into the playoffs. I mean, there's a couple of teams that unfortunately can't make it, like Carolina. Even though they're sitting pretty at 8-3, they could fall out. They have a tough schedule with New Orleans, Minnesota, and Atlanta on it. Detroit's a little bit behind too, but they could find a way to get in. Even Washington, who's at 5-6 right now, a couple years ago they were 3-6 and they won 7 games in a row to get into the playoffs. So you never know with the Redskins, but the way things are looking right now, this is what I have for the NFC.
I think that's a really good picture. I think obviously this is a pretty good projection. I actually do agree with you, but you're right. I think Carolina and Detroit are probably the 2 teams that we don't have on this list right here that if any of the 2 teams from the NFC are going to go in, I think those are the 2 teams that could take out either the 5th or the 6th seed here. All right, let's moving on to the AFC. Jeremy will now take his picks for who he thinks will come to the playoffs come January.
All right, let's start off with number 1 first, the New England Patriots.
Of course.
I mean, come on, guys. They're rolling. Those defensive issues early on in the season, this is Bill Belichick we're talking about. Those things are totally fixed, not an issue anymore. Next at number 2, you got the Steelers, a very high-powered offense and a vastly improved defense with guys like T.J. Watt and all those guys, James Harrison playing at a very high level as well on that defense. The thing to notice here, these 2 teams have to play each other in Week 15, so that could decide who gets the number 1 seed and home field advantage in the conference championship. My expectation is that the Patriots win that game, but you never know, so that'll be a very interesting thing to see. Next at number 3, we have the Tennessee Titans. I think finally with Mariota getting healthier now and playing at a high level, and that defense playing at a very high level as well, you're going to see this team be very competitive in an AFC playoff picture that's not very competitive or very deep, but they could make some things happen because of that. At number 4, we have the Chiefs. The Chiefs right now are on a major slide. Their offense, the offense that they had early in the season with Kareem Hunt and Alex Smith playing at a MVP level is just nowhere to be found at this point. A lot of analysts have been talking about the Chiefs basically doing the same thing on offense and not making any game plan changes as the season has gone on, and that's been a problem for the Chiefs. I do think that they will be able to get this 4 seed though and figure out some of these problems, because I do not see an Andy Reid coached team sliding out of the playoff picture. Now at number 5 we have the Jaguars. Jacksonville, baby. These guys are just amazing. This defense is so much better than it's been in recent years. Blake Bortles is playing to some of the better of his capabilities, but he is very still mistake prone. So this could be a thing that causes Jacksonville to fall out of the playoff picture. But like I said before, not a very weak it's a very weak AFC. So he still could keep them at that number 5 spot. But once again, at number 6, you have the Chargers, and this team is really hot as well. Phillip Rivers just tore apart the Cowboys on Thanksgiving, and that game was not competitive from the beginning. The Chargers defense is also playing really well right now, and I'm super impressed with first-year coach Anthony Lynn, who has a lot of experience as an assistant coach in the NFL and is highly regarded, and I'm not surprised at all at the job that he's done with the Chargers. Another thing to note is that the Chiefs and the Chargers have to play each other later this year, and that could decide who gets that divisional title and who sneaks in at the wild card spot. So all the teams who have to play each other in this AFC race could decide a lot of the seedings.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were mentioning, the Chiefs and the Chargers will be playing each other later in the year. Of course, as we know, especially in the playoffs, home field advantage is just that, a absolutely huge advantage. I agree with you with the Patriots and Steelers. It was the 1 and 2 seeds. Whoever winning that Week 15 game most likely will be holding the AFC Championship game at their home stadium. One thing I find interesting is the placement of the Titans and Jaguars. I think it's very possible that you have the Jaguars end up taking that division and having that home playoff game. Out of these 6 that didn't make it, who do you think is most likely to maybe get into one of those wild card spots?
So, as of right now, Baltimore is in the playoffs. If the season ended today, they would get in the playoffs. I do not see them getting in, though. Joe Flacco is just not playing up to the big contract that he got after the Super Bowl. And the defense is playing well enough to keep them above water, but Joe Flacco's performance is just not what it needs to be in order for them to make the playoffs, even in a weak AFC like this. I think Cincinnati is a more realistic option. Their running game is starting to get going with Joe Mixon, getting more consistent carries. AJ Green playing really well. And Oakland might also, if they get their defense more in rhythm, they could be a good competitor to grab a playoff spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting. At the beginning of the year, we were talking about possibly 3 teams from the AFC West making the playoffs, and now with this projection, well, we still have a decent 2, but not the 2 that anyone thought they would be. But that's the beauty of the NFL. With still over a month left, we have a lot of football left to play, so anything can happen. But as of right now, that's where we stand. Well, that'll do it from this week's segment on the NFL. We will see you guys next week. Now coming up, we have the NBA.